All right, we're back on MorningLine. It's our final segment this morning with Sara Beth Myers. She is the Human Trafficking Coordinator with the U.S. Attorney's Office here in Middle Tennessee. It's good to have you on.
Thank you.
Important topic. Listen, when we went to the break, we were talking about the fact that there are 5, I guess, characteristics that people can maybe keep an eye out for that, you know, if they see it, they should contact someone, right?
Right.
All right, so what should you look for, and what will give you an idea that, yes, this woman or man may be human trafficked?
So those 5 points have been distilled from a number of different indicators of human trafficking, and they are available on the eyesupnashville.com website.
Okay.
But mainly what people need to be looking for is there someone who is with a person who seems fearful, anxious in any way, or is just generally acting subservient to another person. Does that person know where they are? Do they know what city they're in? Are their documents being controlled? Does someone pay for them? Are they under the age of 18? Does it appear that they have been physically abused in some way? Those are the main things to really look for. It's
crazy because I'm thinking about that, and one, maybe I'm not paying attention, but I can't think of any time in my life, really, where I've seen, you know, some bad behavior, but where something like that would have caught my mind and to call because I think it was human trafficking. Until you say that, I just can't think I've seen that. I've not seen someone where, unless husband and wife, and one's paying and the other's not. I don't notice that. It's rare that you're going to, isn't it? The average Joe?
Well, it's not really.
So if I keep my eyes open, I'll see something like this.
That's why we call it eyes up.
I got you.
Have your eyes up.
Good point, yeah.
And it's around us all the time. And so these are things that people aren't trained to look for, and we're simply educating people on what to look for so that they can actually be the eyes and the ears of law enforcement.
Yeah,
and we can stop. This is a prevention campaign.
And it is a federal crime. Felony.
Oh, yes.
Federal crime, felony.
Absolutely.
You can do some hard time.
Absolutely.
Have you locked some people up?
Oh, yes. People have been locked up in our office for doing human trafficking.
Isn't that awesome? It's great locking them up when they do this, all right, and put them away. So wait, we should let people know it's a felony. Now, one thing you mentioned to me during the break that I thought was interesting, we know, and we want to make it very clear, that human trafficking is something that's here 24/7, you know, every day of the year, any place, especially in big cities. But when you have something like the NFL draft, you were saying that it's very organized, and there may be some actually coming from New York City. Give me that scenario, and it could be from other cities, about they recognizing this and can bring people here.
Sure. There are a couple types of human trafficking organizations, and in terms of that activity, it can come from other cities. You know, opportunistic, you know, like businesses come to Nashville, food trucks come to Nashville, you know, for certain events because they recognize that there is going to be an increased demand. It's the same with human trafficking. So highly organized human trafficking cells will in fact send people here. Sure, that's one way that it can happen. But in addition to that, there's what is already here.
Yeah.
There's already a network of human traffickers right here in Nashville and in Middle Tennessee, right under our noses right now.
So what you would say too, when you work one of these cases, you're, I guess, not arresting, but trying to rescue the women if they're in this situation, or the men, correct?
Yes, trying to get them into a safe place.
And who you really want to prosecute are the scumbags that have them doing this, that are organizing
those traffickers, absolutely.
What about the Johns?
The Johns can absolutely be prosecuted as well, because they are
in connection with human trafficking.
In connection
as well.
with human, well, it depends on their particular relationship to that. Are they doing the trafficking, or are they a customer involved in prostitution?
Now, if they're a customer involved in prostitution, and it turns out to be, because the very high-profile case was with you know, the owner of the Patriots, Mr. Kraft, down in Florida, and initially they said, okay, prostitution and maybe human trafficking, and now we're not hearing as much about human trafficking, maybe just a prostitution charge. How do you blend that? How would it be if you go someplace where there is human trafficking and you're taking those services, you could be charged with that?
So if you're going to, say, a massage parlor, and this is something that the Tennessee Licensure Board for the massage parlors in our state is very attuned to. They are monitoring this situation heavily, and especially when we have a surge of activity. But the John is most likely going to be prosecuted at the state level for prostitution.
Gotcha.
It's the traffickers that the federal government is extremely interested in, because those are the highly organized organizations that we want to infiltrate and break up, and then rescue those victims of human trafficking, regardless of where they come from, regardless of how old they are or what they look like.
Let me just ask you this question. It was interesting. The other day, I had Sheriff Darren Hall on, and he's very much against, human trafficking. Of course, we all are. But the idea of prostitution and the prosecution of the Johns at the state level, I know that's not what you do, but in his mind, in some ways, prostitution, should not be illegal if it's between two consenting adults, the way it's set up, in terms of, not that it's something he condones, but that in terms of the prosecution, the cost, the jail time, and all the expense coordinated with it for what it is. What do you think of that? And he's not alone. There are some who think it's a victimless crime, and some were saying as much with Bob Kraft in Florida. When you have two consenting adults, but money's being exchanged, if there's no human trafficking involved, should prostitution remain illegal? What's your thoughts on that?
It is not a victimless crime. And these women, for the most part, no little girl, and this includes boys too, no child is going to say, I want to grow up and be a prostitute. That is not something that happens. Most likely what happens is there's an abuse scenario. Those children have been abused from a young age. This is not a conscious pretty woman type decision that they're making, trying to achieve the Cinderella dream. They've been abused, usually sexually abused, and they get addicted to drugs, quite possibly as a result, to numb that feeling of being abused and to merely survive. And they don't know how to make a living quite often. And they fall into these unhealthy relationships where they believe that that person loves them when they're actually being abused. And the cycle repeats itself. It is a cycle of abuse, and it is a cycle that is perpetuated by drugs and by people who take advantage of that abused person's situation.
And that's even if, per se, the human trafficking component is not necessarily involved in that. That can still be there, just as what did you call it, an isolated incident of prostitution?
Right,
okay.
Right. It can be isolated, but almost assuredly, when you lift over the history of that person and you figure out how they got to that point, it is not a pretty picture. That person has almost assuredly been abused in some fashion before they arrived in that vulnerable position where they're being exploited.
Gotcha. Well said. Listen, I want to put up the number, if we can, for where people should call or how they should contact, and just hit them again with this. There are going to be hundreds of thousands of people in the city this week. Okay, you're the U.S. Attorney, Assistant U.S. Attorney here in this district, and human trafficking is going to be an issue. What do you want people to do?
We want people to call the Tennessee Human Trafficking Hotline. Thank you so much. Yes, it is 855-55-TN-HTH, and that's Tennessee Human Trafficking Hotline, and that's how you can remember it. But of course, if there's an emergency, we want people to dial 911 first.
Now, if they do call that number, are they getting a recording where they're supposed to leave their information, or are they going to talk to someone?
There's going to be heightened presence on the hotline, so there's going to be live people taking information, and because there's a surge in law enforcement presence in the community, both in plainclothes and in uniform, throughout the draft and the marathon and the concert events that are occurring all this week. There are going to be an increased, I suppose a decrease in the number of time, the amount of time it's going to take to respond. So we're ready, we're prepared, and there's going to be an increase in law enforcement stings most likely as well.
Okay, yeah, and that's fine. People can guess that. They're not going to know where or who, and that's the thing, but there will be stings. But what I'm hearing then is there will be a quicker response than maybe perhaps typically because there are more people watching. So you suspect, will we have some arrests this weekend?
Absolutely. There will be arrests this weekend.
No doubt. And federal prosecution. What kind of time do you serve if you get convicted of a felony for human trafficking?
Oh, you're looking at several years. It depends on a number of factors. And so we can't say if those will be federally prosecuted or prosecuted at the state level. But we will know that people will be arrested and that we are looking, we are watching in the community, and we need the people of Nashville to help look for those signs of human trafficking so that we can stop this before it starts and we can prevent human trafficking.
And when you do make the arrest, do you oftentimes need the women or the men who are being trafficked to testify against the folks? And what if they're not willing or they're afraid to? Can you still prosecute these guys and get them?
It just depends case by case.
Is it typically, though, will they testify against or not? I mean, have you had that?
Commonly, after a period of time, the victim, as I said initially, the victim may not realize that they are, in fact, a victim of a crime. And that's the first hurdle that we have to get over.
So sometimes you'll move in when you get the tip and you'll make the arrest and they'll be like, what are you doing here? And they don't realize because they're isolated that they were victims at that point.
That's correct.
So you're going in and having to explain to them, listen, this is not right. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I love this guy and I'm working for him. And you say, no, you need to understand.
And the attorneys in our office aren't the people who usually do that explaining. It takes a lot of therapy.
Right.
So it takes a lot of therapy. We work with the nonprofit community, and we ensure that that person, through our victim witness coordinator, is getting the resources that they need to help them through the healing process. And they may not even realize that they need to heal. So it takes some time. And because these cases are complex, it can take years to prosecute them. So there is time, luckily, on our side, in that we have a victim who is able to get resources before we reach a crucial point of trial or sentencing where they would need to speak.
You know what gets me about this, thinking about it, just what an undertaking it must be for these pimps. I mean, to get the women, to coordinate it, to organize it, to house them, to get them addicted, to get the Johns, to... Is it that lucrative?
It's a very lucrative
Really?
industry.
I mean, what do you mean? How much money do they make? I mean, if a pimp and they have an organization and they have 5 or 6 that they farm out, what kind of money? I mean, it would have to be a ton for them, because would you agree? I mean, it's quite an undertaking to organize this, to get them, to control them, to transport them, to get the clients in place, to set up where they go. I mean, that's a lot of work. You know, and to do all that, the money is that lucrative.
There's a lot of forfeiture involved as well. So any property that is purchased through illegal means is something that the government can then take back. And that's both on the state and the federal side.
We're talking about cars, houses, boats, whatever.
Money, yes, exactly.
Or the cash that they end up.
Yes, the cash itself.
And is this usually affiliated, the larger organizations, with organized crime?
Oh yes, it's not just human trafficking, but I mean any organized crime. It's very lucrative, and that's why people.
Well, I know that. I know the drug trade and things like this, and selling drugs, but trafficking in a human, as opposed to trafficking in some kind of illegal narcotic, just seems handling the human aspect. It must take a lot of work.
It's certainly more complex than moving, an inanimate object, say cocaine, into different cells to be distributed.
Yeah.
But those women aren't getting paid. And I say women, it's both men and women, but predominantly women are not being paid anything, or if they are, it's, you have shelter.
Right, and food, and that's the money comes out of that.
You're in this country, period, or, you're a minor, you have to do what I say. You owe me because I feed you, things like that. And they're being controlled the entire time, whether or not they realize they're being controlled.
Okay, and to get to that point, I'm thinking that many of them that they target to bring them into the fold are already high risk to begin with. I'm just trying to think. I mean, is there a prototype of the type of woman that ends up in this kind of situation?
Someone who's vulnerable. It's that simple.
Well, I would imagine not much of a family structure, maybe already some kind of addiction. I have to wonder about their level of education. Have you seen it with all kinds?
It can happen to anyone, just like abuse can happen to anyone, just like domestic violence can happen to anyone. It doesn't affect one socioeconomic class more than another. It just takes different forms, just like in prostitution. You have people who are on the street who are prostituting for drugs, and you have people who are escorts. It's the same crime, and it's prosecuted the same way, but they're just different flavors of the same. And so it's the same in human trafficking. You have children who come from unfortunate backgrounds, who have been abused since they were small children.
Right.
But they can come from any number of backgrounds. They can be impoverished, or they can come from a wealthy family, and they were abused just the same.
Yeah.
They were affected psychologically, and they had those adverse childhood experiences just the same as someone who grew up in poverty.
Yeah.
And so we can't really put people in boxes.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, but typically, would you say they're going to be younger?
Oftentimes it is minors, but sometimes it's grown people as well.
Well, like in their 20s?
Possibly, but people can be trafficked even in their 30s and 40s. You'd be surprised. Eyes up, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what the person looks like or what their background is. Obviously, it's more suspect and easier to identify if it is a minor. But it can be people who would seeming like they can take care of themselves. They're a grown adult, but look at the circumstances. How are they behaving in relationship to this person who is with them and who is handling them, so it would seem. Pay attention.
It's opened up my eyes, and I will. And again, the number was just up there on the screen. We'll give it again. So are you going to be working this weekend? You're not running the marathon, are you?
I'm not running the marathon. I have friends who are.
Are you going to be working?
Oh, yes. I'll be working. I'll be available all weekend.
So when they make some arrests,
the United States Attorney's Office is ready.
Listen, thank you for coming on. You're really good.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Sara Beth Myers, thanks for coming on, and very important topic. If there's ever anything that we need to get out along these lines with new developments, let us know. And bring David Bowling with you, okay? But he can stay over there. Yeah, you stay over there, David. All right. Nice to have you on. Thank you very much. And good luck with everything this weekend. I hope you guys go out there and get them, all right?
We will.
We'll take a break. I'll be back with, we have two other crazy guests joining us in just a moment. There's Rebecca, and Leland's coming too. We'll be right back after this.